Hi, I'm Karl Taylor from visualeducation.com. Today we're going to be looking at full length or full body or almost full length, three-quarter length, whatever you want to call it, shots, because this comes up time and time again about how do I light for full length shots or three-quarter length shots. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples, different ways I light for full length shots. Some use more expensive lighting modifiers, but I've also got some ways that are a lot less expensive, actually relatively inexpensive lighting setups that are also effective for full length shots. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start off with the relatively simple ones. So this is a common requirement for a full-length shot, and it's for full-length business portraits or three-quarter length from the knees upwards is often a required business portrait lighting setup. So on this gentleman here, it was a business portrait example, and we've got a lovely broad soft light from one side, from the left hand side, and it's illuminating all the way down the body, but there's still a nice amount of fill light on the right hand side and the background illuminated at the same time. This is actually using lighting modifiers, softboxes, and I'm going to show you the BTS on that in a second, which shows you how that was lit. But then I'm going to show you a very economical way of doing the same thing as well. So let's take a look at the BTS on that particular shot. And if we go into the behind the scenes shot, you'll see here the subject standing against a white wall, relatively close to the white wall, maybe a meter or so in front of it. And you can see a very large softbox being used here. It's the 120 by 180 centimeter softbox, the largest one that I've got, and it's sort of three-quarters of the way around on him. The key thing to remember here is that we've got a white floor, so the white floor is also bouncing some light up. So if you're working in a darker studio space, you can lay out a white sheet on the ground, which will help bounce light back up into the lower part of the body. Notice my assistant holding a piece of reflector card, a white card, out of shot to the right, which is all the fill light that we needed because we've got such large, broad lighting. But if we look at this other behind the scenes shot, you can see there's also a large octabox on the left. So I'm creating a sort of wraparound lighting that goes from the side of the subject and partially around sort of 45 degrees to the front, with the assistant holding a white reflector on the right. So no lighting was needed at all on the right-hand side because of the reflector. And if we look at the overhead behind-the-scenes shot, that can give you a better idea of the large, broad lighting that's being used. The assistant isn't there holding the card at that point, but you can imagine for the final shot they were. And that lighting setup allows for this lovely, large, broad, clean, very soft lighting, which is particularly suited to older portraits. So, you know, middle-aged, older people, that larger, broad, soft lighting is a little bit more flattering, a little bit softer, and it can result in a really nice, welcoming light. We didn't need any light for the background because the subject was close enough to the background that that large, broad lighting is doing the job of lighting the background at the same time. And then notice on the right-hand side, my right-hand side, the subject, they're not in the shadows, they're not too dark, because the reflector holding that large piece of white card is bouncing enough light back into the shadows that it creates a wraparound lighting that just wraps around lovely and smoothly and then gradates away just, you know, softly, so that the shadows and the three-dimensional form is still there, but it's not too aggressive or hard. Very simple lighting setup for full-length shots. But what happens if you don't have those big, large softboxes in your toolkit to use? Let me show you another more economical way of working with the same lighting or a similar lighting setup. So if we look at this shot of Lydia in the blue dress, again, almost a full-length shot, 3/4 length. This time she's being lit from the right-hand side, or my right-hand side, but you can see again it's that same large, broad, wraparound, soft lighting. Very, very simple in this case, and much more economical than the last lighting setup I showed you. Because if we go to the behind the scenes on this one, we can see that this one is actually utilizing just big white polyboards, big giant white reflectors. And what we do is we arrange those in a V shape. It's often called a V-flat setups, where you create a corner with two large white panels, and then you just shine one bright studio light into that corner, and often bare bulb, that's so there's no reflector focusing the light, there's no modifier on the light, it's just the bare bulb light. That allows the light to spread around into that V corner, and it illuminates the whole corner, and then all of that light bounces back, and it basically creates a really huge softbox lighting look. But there's one little caveat on that, which you'll see in one of the other behind-the-scenes shots here. You'll notice that I've got a lid on top of the V-flat arrangement there. Let's see if we can see it a little bit better in this one. So you can see there's a lid over the top of the V-flat that allows that light to get trapped in there. Because you can imagine if you're using your V-flat corner and bouncing light into it with a bare bulb, the bare bulb light is going forwards, but it's also coming out the top, coming downwards and out the sides. So a white floor helps because that bounces the light back up into the V-flat. But if you put a white lid on top of the V-flat, it traps that light that was going up, brings it back down into that corner V-flat, and encapsulates it all, and then throws it back onto your subject to give that lovely soft lighting. So that's a really economical way you can work, because these large poly boards, we get them from builders merchants, they're just polystyrene boards, 8 foot by 4 foot. They're like $10 each. A couple of those with a couple of stands to hold them, position them, and you can create the look of these super large softboxes in a very economical way. Okay, let's move on to a sort of step up, if you like, the softest possible full-length lighting. So we're going to take a look at this shot here of my model Susan. This is a more stylized sort of fashion shot where I've got all these white blocks in the shot as sort of props, as supporting cast to the shot, and also to create some sort of three-dimensionality of shapes and tones, etc. in the shot. But this is quite a large set. The model is wearing a white outfit, and I wanted this really super, super soft lighting feel to the shot. And because it's a large scene that we're having to illuminate, how did I do that? Well, a couple of little tricks on this to get this uber, super soft look. Let's take a look at the behind the scenes on that one. So if we jump into the behind the scenes, this is a great example. So you can see 4 studio lights running down along this wall, along my Cove studio wall. And I'm just firing 4 lights with standard reflectors, or slightly wider than standard reflectors, so that they don't spill out everywhere, but they spill wide onto the wall. And I'm just using the whole white wall as a reflector panel. So it's a little bit like the V-flat version, but on a much larger scale, so that we're literally illuminating 10 meters of wall and using that whole wall as one huge softbox, bouncing all this beautiful soft light back into my subject and illuminating the scene, the floor, the blocks, the background, and everything as well. You'll notice there in the shot as well an Octabox 150 that's being used from above. So I added a little bit of extra light on the top of the model for the model's face and head area, just as an extra little bit of fill in there. Let's move to the next behind the scenes shot, which gives you the overhead view. So there you can see my overhead view with the 150 octabox, plus the 4 lights illuminating the wall. You can also see my low shooting angle. There's my camera quite low down on my mono stand. And if we explore the photograph again, you can see that beautiful soft light illuminating the whole scene, because we've got that massive, massive white wall illuminated, but then just a little bit of extra light from above, which then made sure these shadows don't go too dark on this side, which is from the softbox from above. But that was just very minimal, that softbox from above. The majority of that lighting is all this left-hand side lighting, all the way down the body, all nice and even down these blocks. And that was from that whole wall being illuminated. Now, of course, this is in a very large studio. You can do this on a much smaller scale. So you might have just a small garage studio with white walls. And if you just fire 1 or 2 studio lights at that white wall of your garage studio, or even if you put a load of polyboard white panels and fire lights into those, you can equally create this large, huge softbox look for that super, super soft lighting that we've got in that particular picture. Okay, moving on to another technique for full-length shots. So if you look at this shot, I've got my model Deborah jumping into shot. It's a darker shot in terms of the background, shot on a grey paper roll of paper background. And the majority of the lighting is on the upper part of the body, up here. Face, neck, shoulders, head area. The light falls off a little bit down to the bottom of the shot, but not so much that it's underexposed. It's still a usable shot. Deborah's skipped into the shot really, really well. We've captured all of those textures and fabrics and everything really, really nice. Got a nice little bit of energy in that shot. Let's look at the behind the scenes on that shot. So you can see here, it's actually used by using 3 umbrellas from the front, in front of my model. And I've got 1 umbrella at the back, which is being used just to throw a little backlight onto the hair. And you can see it's just using a standard mid-grey paper roll background, which is taped down to the floor. And then I allow my model to just run and skip into the shot. This other lighting you can see in the background here on the right is not lighting that's being used for the shot. That's just lighting that's in the studio in the corner. So the key light is coming from 3 silver umbrellas. And silver umbrellas are really inexpensive modifiers, economical modifiers. But if you clump them all together, above one central, one either side, but from above, you can create a really quite a nice fashion lighting on an economic level. Let's look at again the behind the scenes. This is the backlight for the hair. There's the 3 lights from above. So you can see the one from above, the key one is up sort of 45-degree angle, but the other 2 are a little bit lower down, a little bit more side lighting. But that then creates a huge light source. And the 3 combined and overlapping slightly means that we don't end up with a different directional light. It almost all just becomes one light, but it stays quite sparkly and quite lively. And you can see the model Deborah there running and skipping and jumping into the shot. And there's the 3 lights, the 3 key lights in relation to that. And let's just go back to the shot. And that's the resulting lighting look that we get from that. The light that was used at the back from behind is just to add this little bit of light to the top of the hair, just to give a little bit of backlighting to get a little bit more brightness on that hair. Wasn't absolutely essential, that light. You could have just done this shot with the 3 lights from the front. So that's another quite economic way of lighting sort of larger full-length images. Okay, we're going to move on to slightly more expensive, elaborate lighting setups now. I've got 3 images to look at here. We've got this first one, which is a full-length shot, but also with more of the scene in there as well. And this is quite a bit more complex because, one, we've got the set that we had to build and the scene, and we're working on a wider position, wider shooting angle, so we're getting not just the full length, but we've gone landscape here, and therefore you're seeing that scene, so we've had to illuminate the whole thing. But if we look closely, you can see this lovely soft broad lighting all the way down the model, but it's got very much more sort of sparkly quality to it as well because of the modifier that we're using. And if you study the light a little bit more and look at it, you'll also notice a patch of light in the corner here on the set, patch of light on the floor. You'll notice that this side of the dress is lit down here in the lower part of the legs. It's coming from the right-hand side, whilst we've also got light coming from the left. But because the model's face is turned towards the main key lighting, we're just getting a really nice fall-off of lighting wrapping around the face so that we've got it wrapping around and just a small sort of shadow from the nose. Let's take a look at the behind-the-scenes lighting on that one. So I've got a few behind the scenes shots here for you to look at. So you can see the key light is the very large Para 222. This is a huge light, a huge modifier, 2.2 meters diameter, with a focusing rod that allows you to move the light in and out to change the beam of light and the spread of light. And it's a very directional light because of the parabolic shape. So it focuses that light straight onto the model. It's hard light and soft light at the same time. Hard because it's actually illuminating the petals inside the parabolic modifier as almost like 24 separate hard lights around the periphery, but with some central reflection as well. But equally, because it's big, it creates a soft look, but still three-dimensional. And it means it's a light that you can use from further away, as was necessary for this shot, because I wanted to incorporate the scene as well. Now, you remember I mentioned about the lighting in the corner of the room down here. You can see that is coming from up here, from this very small little snooted light, which is just a little narrow beam of light lighting down the corner of the room. What you can't see in this BTS shot is the light from the right-hand side, which you will now see in this shot. So we have another parabolic light over here, which is a Para 88, illuminating that lower part of the body and dress. And then over here, this light here, which is this one that's being used, and this one is illuminating little patches on the background set. So not on the model, just on the background. So there's only really two lights on the model. That is the big Para 222 and the Para 88. That other Para there I don't think was being used. But if we jump back to the main shot, you'll see how the Para 222 is giving us this beautiful light down the left-hand side. The Para 88 is giving us the light down the right-hand side that's catching the hair, down the arm, down the dress on the right-hand side to give us that lovely contour between key light, shadow, and then fill light, if you like, on the right. And then the other lighting you can see, this patch of light down here on the right, this patch of light here, and this patch of light in the corner are all coming from those extra lights that were on the background. Okay, sticking with the Para 222 for full-length shots. But this time I've used it a little differently. If you notice, the catch light in the eye looks a little bit harder of light on one side of the Para 222 and less light on the other side. And the reason for that is because one nice trick with the Para 222 is to actually angle it. You don't need to always use it fully directional. You can create some quite interesting lighting techniques by twisting the light. And if we look here, you can see there it's being used behind me, but notice I've twisted the light slightly at an angle, and that gives me a slightly different look to that, almost like a crescent of light, but it's still a very large light source. I can still use it directly behind me, Now, from the angle that we're looking at it here in this BTS shot, it looks like we're seeing the whole light, and we are, but that's because it's pointing towards the cameraman here, but it's not actually pointing directly at the model. From the model's perspective, it's a bit of a crescent at a half angle, and only half of the modifier is being really brightly illuminated and the other half less brightly illuminated. So you can work with these modifiers quite cleverly if you think about different ways of using them. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I'm never going to be able to use a Para 222. Well, actually, think about it that you may, because you can rent these lights. Sometimes you rent a studio space to use, or you've got a studio space you want to use, but you can actually rent these lights in most major cities, or rent the modifier, I should say, because you can put any light you like in that modifier. And the rental charges on these for a day aren't too great, so they are available to you if you wanted to use them for these sort of full-length shots. Okay, let's move on to another one that's a little bit more complicated in how it's done. So this is a sort of three-quarter length, full-length sort of shot, and I really like the lighting on this one and the look and the feeling of it. But there's a number of different things going on the lighting on this shot. I've got multiple light sources to create the lighting look that we're seeing in that shot. So if we move to the behind the scenes, we can see that this one is actually 3 lights used for the model. Now, you might not be able to quite understand what's going on in that BTS shot, so I'm just going to look at the next one so that we can kind of give you a bit more. Okay, so it doesn't really show us more. But basically what you can consider here is that this light on the giraffe boom here, from the model's perspective, that light is directly in front of her at a 45-degree angle coming down. And then directly behind that is a Para 133 with another light in it. So from the model's perspective, she can see the smaller light in front and then the Para 133 directly behind that light. And the reason for that is it allowed me to control a level of harder illumination from closer front and then a softer fill illumination behind. You could have just done this shot with the Para 133 behind and moved the light in and out, but this gave me the control of having the light in the defocus soft position, but then adding a harder light look in front of it that has got a little bit of diffusion material on the front of it so it doesn't get too hard, but it just gives me control that I can control the exposure on one light in the foreground closer to the model, slightly differently to the fill light from behind. And then you'll see a small 35 by 60 softbox here low down. That's just used as a little kick light to kick a little bit of light into the shadows for a little bit of fill light under the chin and the shadow sides of the fabric, and also to illuminate a little bit lower down the body. And if we just go back to the actual shot, you'll see all of those combined to give that lighting look that I've arrived at there. I was very pleased with the final look on that image. And there's one light that you can't see in the behind the scenes shot, which is the light that is on the background. And that's another light, a harder light, just throwing a ball of light on the background to create that small glow behind our subject in that particular shot. So there we have it, a number of ways to light full length or 3/4 length body shots, from standard softboxes to even more economic methods using V-flats or polyboards, or other economical methods of using a large white wall and just illuminating the wall with your studio lighting and using it as a giant bounce, or up to some of the more expensive fashion lighting, which, if you want to give it a try, as I mentioned, you can rent that sort of lighting in most cities around the world. I'm Karl Taylor from visualeducation.com. Hope this gave you an insight into how I light some full-length shots. Thanks very much for watching.